Hi, we're Group 5 and our site was Granary Square. Our research question is, what does the King's Cross Corporation own in Granary Square, and what are the terms and expectations of this ownership?
As part of my involvement in this group project and building on the research group framework, I have focused on the financial and business background to better understand the ownership of the King's Cross project. My methodology involved online research and reaching out directly to the main players in the development. Using my background in finance, I contacted the CEO of Federated Hermes, Chris Taylor, and conducted an email and telephone interview with him. This greatly clarified the history of the development and the many partners involved. To start at the beginning, in 2006, Argent, the developer and asset manager partner for the project, finally received planning consent from Camden and Islington Council. The redevelopment began a year later in 2007, when the London and Continental Railway and DHL formed a joint partnership, King's Cross Central Limited Partnership. This simplified the complex land ownership into one entity, given the numerous land encumbrances and agreements. Hermes Investment Management, which was wholly owned by BT Pension Scheme, led the pension fund's investment in the King's Cross regeneration projects. Its approach combined investment performance with positive environmental and social impacts, what they labelled a sustainable wealth creation. In 2016, LCR, owned by the UK government and DHL, announced the sale of their investment to Australian Super Pension. LCR ended its direct 20 years involvement with the site, returning proceeds to the Treasury of 371 million sterling. This brought the Australian pension fund's total to 67.5% after it bought its initial 25% stake a year earlier. The remaining 32.5% is owned by BTPS and managed by Federated Hermes. The former Granary warehouse is owned directly by the University Central St. Martin. Today, King's Cross has gross average value of 3.5 billion. Annualized returns, it stands at 18.5%.
One of the things that really stuck out to me was, how do people use the space? So while we're outside, I took the opportunity at Granary Square to ask the public what they thought.
What does Granary mean?
Oh look, see, there are staff here, look. I'm going to ask.
The red hair.
Yeah, let's ask.
Yeah.
Hi, excuse me. Hiya, we're from the university and we're doing some research. Do you work for this site?
Yeah, King Cross site, yeah.
Oh, so is it a council site or?
No, private.
Oh,
yeah.
So you work for King's Cross as the company?
Yeah.
King's Cross. Oh. And does it get really busy here usually?
This is, like, summertime it does, yeah.
Okay.
But mind you, I've only been here 6 weeks.
Okay. How are you finding it?
All right, nice.
Yeah, what are the people, like different types of people? Yeah? Oh, you're working. To interrupt you. But thank you so much, it's so helpful because...
Don't talk to them.
Yeah, we want to find out a little bit more, like, how do people use this space, like stuff like that?
Like, how do you mean?
Like, why do people come here?
The shop,
Yeah.
the views, the water fountains,
Nice.
like the kids,
Yeah, that's something I've noticed, lots of the kids.
like plus by the canal,
Okay, yeah.
the gas holders,
Okay,
the
yeah.
apartments.
What's your favourite part?
Probably the gas holders.
Oh, really?
They're cool.
Shanti, what was the fact you gave about it again?
So apparently they're the second most expensive apartments
Yeah,
in the UK outside of Mayfair.
Right.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Yeah,
Where you want it?
it's insane.
And carrying on this qualitative research brought out some more findings. One of the things that Jimmy said, that's the worker that works for King's Cross Corporation, was that even though he had grown up in the area, he didn't feel like he belonged. This idea of ownership and belonging and who uses the space is really interesting. When you think of the name King's Cross, the connotation might be public space, public ownership. But when I spoke to people, that's not necessarily what the experience was. Here's a look at what some of the research showed.
My area was to look at the relationship between King's Cross Corporation and the borough, so the borough of Camden. The reason I was interested in that is because obviously focusing on the corporation, we're looking at a private entity, but we were quite interested, I think all of us actually were quite interested in the blurred lines between public and private and how that works in the UK. So in the meeting we had last week, Pavel actually mentioned that as a non-British person, he found that quite impenetrable, understanding the public and private differences in our planning laws. So I think the key thing that I found from this research was urban planning documents from the London Borough of Camden to basically determine what private developers can actually do. And the key point from that research that I found interesting was I felt that some of their objectives were potentially not met by King's Cross Corporation. So you can see in that quote I have there, they mention this idea of protecting certain characteristics of an area, whether that's kind of aesthetic or style characteristics, but also demographic characteristics. And you could definitely argue that those objectives set by the borough haven't actually been met. So that was kind of my key discovery, I guess, from my part of the research, just looking at those, the official rules and guidelines set by the borough for private developers, and the fact that, I guess, in a sort of qualitative analysis, just speaking to locals about how they feel in the area in Granary Square now, it doesn't seem like those objectives have actually been met, and I'm not really sure. I guess there's a subjectiveness to that, but that was my main takeaway.
So where to next? Like most research projects, we probably ended up with more questions than we did answers. So as we come together to work on our group presentation, we're going to be delving a little bit deeper into this topic of ownership, who owns what, and what it means for the legacy of the King's Cross area.